Nothing is real. Let me explain. Have you ever wondered whether your perception of reality actually reflects what's truly there? If what we perceive all around us is a true representation of what is there, or even if there's anything there at all. So, take this cup of tea. I can see it, I can smell it, I can feel its weight, I can even taste it. Now, if I was to give it to you, I would assume that you could do the same. But is it really there? Now, I know that sounds like a ridiculous question. Of course it's there, right? Well, not necessarily. There have been some discoveries in quantum physics that appear to dispute that claim, and that might reframe the way that we think about the universe and consciousness itself. Stick with me. So, what is real? Real objects are things that are defined as existing in our physical universe that are independent of our minds. Trouble is, that's not really how things work. It seems that our minds aren't quite as independent to reality as we might think. Now, an early indication of reality being influenced by our consciousness was the discovery of a phenomenon known as wave-particle duality. This discovery shows that both electrons and photons can exhibit both wave-like and particle-like behaviours, depending on how they are observed or measured. In classical physics, objects are either particles or waves. However, in the quantum realm, particles tend to exhibit behaviours that are seemingly contradictory. A good example is the famous double-slit experiment, wherein electrons fired through slits behave as waves interacting with one another, creating an interference pattern on the screen. This implies that each electron is not simply a discrete particle, as they propagate like waves interacting with each other, interfering with other electrons. However, the truly strange thing is that even when a single electron is fired at a time, the interference pattern is still observed, which means the electron is interfering with other electrons that aren't actually there. Moreover, if the experiment is measured or observed, the electron changes again. The waveform completely collapses and the electron begins behaving like a particle, producing a discrete slit pattern on the screen instead of an interference pattern. Very weird. This means that the actual observation of matter changes, or more accurately, confirms its final state. It actually makes it exist. The other aspect of reality that seems intuitive is something known as locality. This is basically where a change to a physical object only occurs when it's interacted with by another object. So when it's touched. So if someone hits you on the head, they have to actually hit you in order for you to feel it. Make sense? They can't telepathically transmit the slap. Well, then there's the effect known as quantum entanglement. This is a phenomenon where two or more particles become correlated in such a way that the state of one particle instantaneously affects the state of another, regardless of the distance between them. This phenomenon was famously described by Albert Einstein, Boris Podolsky and Nathan Rosen in their 1935 paper. So it's backed by some pretty heavy hitters. Imagine two entangled particles, A and B. When one of the particles is measured and its quantum state collapses into a definite value, the state of the other particle spontaneously collapses to a corresponding value instantaneously, regardless of the spatial separation between them. This completely contravenes the principle of locality, as no physical thing can exceed the speed of light. It also works against the principle of causality, where things tend to happen as a result of the influence of other things as time passes. You feel the slap after it hits you, not before. But entanglement acts with vast separation and instantaneously. Using these concepts as a jumping off point, physicists have devised experiments to explore this and have concluded that local realism just isn't the way that our universe operates. In fact, John Clauser, Anton Zeilinger and Alan Aspect won a Nobel Prize in 2022 for proving it. So what does that mean? Well, essentially it means the universe, well, the parts that you can perceive at least, only really exist when you're consciously observing them. Like in a modern video game, the universe appears to be rendered in real time as you perceive it. So everything made of stuff is actually created by your conscious experience. Now, I know that might sound a little bit woo-woo, but remember, Nobel Prize winners. It appears that consciousness is fundamental and matter is secondary. Can't collapse the waveform without an observer, which causes a bit of an issue with neuroscience, where the foundational understanding is that consciousness arises from matter, aka neurons in a brain. However, without local realism, neurons don't exist until they're observed or measured. And they can't give rise to consciousness if they're not there. For this reason, consciousness must exist with no physical substrate, because without consciousness, no physical substrate can exist. So we must ask, in this respect, what is consciousness? Obviously, I don't want to go too far down the psychology rabbit hole, but for the purposes of this video, it can be best described as the individual subjective experiences of the interaction with physical objects. These subjective qualities are known as qualia, things like colour, texture, taste, or even feelings like pain. They are all qualia. Now, the kind of qualia that we perceive are related to the avatar that we inhabit. A bee, for example, would experience the world very differently to that of a human. There are definitely many things that we can feel and experience that a bee just simply can't. However, a bee can actually perceive the ultraviolet light spectrum, and we can't. So therefore, it has access to qualia that we will never have. In fact, there are a multitude of electromagnetic waves that we simply can't experience. Radio waves, X-rays, microwaves, and sound frequencies, and also magnetic frequencies too. And these are just the things that we can measure. The thing is, there could be an infinite amount of qualia that we simply can't perceive or measure. In fact, there might be evidence that qualia that we can't perceive or measure really does have an impact on us. There appears to be less matter in galaxies than is required to hold them together. We call the difference dark matter. Dark because we can't see it, and matter because of its gravitational space-time warping effects. The same goes for dark energy, a mysterious force that seems to be accelerating the expansion of the universe. Again, we can see its effects, but we can't directly see what's causing it. These anomalies in astrophysics could simply be qualia outside of our limited perception. We see their effects, but not their form. Maybe. So, consciousness is the subjective experience of the universe, with those aspects of the universe only coming into being as they're perceived. Brings a new meaning to, if a tree falls in the wood and no one hears it, does it make a sound? No. Unless a bird hears it, of course. Or maybe the surrounding trees can perceive it in some way. I don't know. So it seems like we actually are in some kind of simulation. Kind of. Except our conscious experience is what makes it exist. What makes us exist. So when we make babies, do we pull into existence some entity that perceives itself through the stages of development from zygote to person? So many questions. Don't get me wrong, this is not likely to be the whole picture. But this information has huge implications for what the universe is and how consciousness relates to it. Is it fundamental? Does it pervade everything? Don't ask me, I'm just a bloke off the internet. Nevertheless, this is an interesting topic worthy of further exploration.